Kia ora koutou katoa. Thomas of Solano in the 13th century recorded some stories and legends about St Francis and animals. These are the first accounts we have of St Francis and animals. His first story concerns birds. Francis was no stranger to walking great distances. One day he was making a trip through the Spoleto Valley, and he spotted a great number of birds of all varieties. Swept up in the moment, Francis left his friends in the road and ran after the birds, who patiently waited for him. Remember, this is a story. Francis greeted them, expecting them to take flight as he spoke, but they did not move. Filled with awe, he asked them if they would stay a while and listen to his little sermon. Francis allegedly said to them, "My brother and sister birds, you should praise your Creator and always love God. God gave you feathers for clothes, wings to fly, and all the things you need. It's God who made you noble among all creatures, making your home in thin, pure air. Without sowing or reaping, you receive God's guidance and protection." Well, that was a little sermon, wasn't it? At this, the birds began to spread their wings, stretch their necks, and gaze at Francis, rejoicing and praising in a wonderful way according to their nature. It's been said that the brothers who journeyed with him stood in amazement. Then Francis gave the birds his blessing. At that they flew off, and Francis, rejoicing and giving thanks to God, went on his way. When we, some 8 centuries later, revisit such stories, we can easily dismiss them as fantasy, make-believe, as some might with a fairy tale. But they deserve a closer look, not because we wish to take them literally, but because they point to a way of building respect and interdependence between all living things. Firstly, Francis walked, touching the earth, facing the wind, ears and eyes seeing more than just human beings, buildings, or computer screens. If we are to touch the earth lightly, as the hymn says, we first need to touch the earth. Secondly, and dependent on the first, he noticed. He noticed not just his companions and their concerns, and no doubt some of his own concerns, but he noticed the ecosystem in which he walked, and the birds with their special blessings. Thirdly, he went to the birds and spoke to them. Could they hear and understand? I, like many, speak to the animals I live with and meet. And for the last 2 weeks, I've been talking to a newborn child in our house. What do they understand? Well, I think they understand feelings and emotions, which our voice can convey. But I suspect they understand much more besides. Lastly, Francis was encouraging the birds to give thanks and praise for their life as it is. My guess is that he was preaching to himself as well, as preachers do, and to his followers who would later recall the story. Having an attitude of gratitude is not only a foundation of spirituality, it's also the means by which we can get through the hard times. But I also think we can see our world, if we choose, in a different way. We can see the trees and the wind clapping their hands, as the psalmist says. We can see the playful dog rolling in the grass as giving thanks to God. We can see birds as they chirp and flit, as delighting in the joys of abundant life. In other words, we can use the eyes of our imagination as Francis did, to see gratitude and praise all around, and allow such to lift our spirits, and then to join in the song. The second story. One day, a brother brought a rabbit who'd been caught in a trap to Francis. Francis advised the rabbit to be more alert in the future and then released the rabbit from the trap and set it on the ground to go its way. But the rabbit hopped back onto Francis's lap, desiring to be close to the saint. Francis took the rabbit a few steps into the wood and set it down. But, yes, you guessed it followed Francis back to his seat and hopped on his lap again. Finally, Francis asked one of his fellow friars to take the rabbit far into the woods and let it go. That worked. This type of thing happened repeatedly to Francis. Fish were also known to communicate with Francis. Whenever a fish was caught and Francis was nearby, he would return the fish to the water, warning it not to be caught again. On several occasions, the fish would linger a while near the boat, listening to Francis until he gave them permission to leave. Then they would swim off. Like our first story with the birds, the rabbit and fish tales invite us to pause and see the world with the eyes of our imagination. The rabbit and fish, both of which were part of the then diet, rich sources of protein, were to Francis God's creatures to be treated with kindness and respect. Was Francis therefore a vegetarian? The evidence would suggest not. I'm currently reading a series of novels set in the far north of Alaska, and the lead character, Kate, is an Aleut. That's the indigenous people of the Aleutian Islands. Given the extreme weather, she must gather and hunt and store in the summer and autumn in order to prepare for the winter. In one novel, she shoots a moose. Immediately, she places her hand on the moose and acknowledges his fading life spirit or energy. Then she dances, as her people have for centuries, to express her gratitude to not only the moose, but to the spirit of life that will enable her now to survive the winter. And then she spends 3 days skinning, salting, cutting up the meat and bagging it, some of which she will give away to those less fortunate in their hunting. Over the years, I've met hunters and fisher folk like this, catching and killing only what they need, honouring the animal or fish, honouring their life force, and using all of the carcass for various purposes so that there is no waste. Allied with this, and a major concern in today's world, is the mahi, the work of enhancing the habitats and food supplies of these animals in order that they not only survive but multiply. As our human population has increased, as our love affair with meat and fish likewise, allied with the financial greed of more than a few, so sanctuaries and bigger sanctuaries to preserve wildlife and fish have become increasingly necessary. Maybe if Francis was alive today, he would be advocating a politically motivated vegetarianism. My third and last story from the Francis tradition, and probably the most well-known, concerns a wolf. While Francis was staying in the town of Gubbio, he learned of a wolf so ravenous that it was not only killing and eating domestic animals, but people too. Townsfolk took up arms and went after it. But those who encountered the wolf perished at its sharp teeth. Villagers were afraid to leave the city walls. Francis had pity on the people and decided to go out and meet the wolf. While walking, the wolf suddenly appeared, jaws agape, and charged at Francis. Francis calmly said to the creature, "Come to me, brother wolf. I order you not to hurt anyone." At that moment, the wolf lowered his head and lay down at Francis' feet, meek as a lamb. Francis explained to the wolf that he had been terrorizing the people. No kidding. "Brother wolf," said Francis, "I want you to make peace with the people of Gubbio. I will offer you a deal. If you won't harm them, they won't harm you. Instead, they will feed you and forgive the wrongs of the past." The wolf showed his assent by moving his body and nodding his head. Then the wolf meekly followed Francis back to the town. By the time they got to the town square, everyone was there to witness this miracle. With the wolf at his side, Francis offered the townsfolk peace on behalf of the wolf. The townsfolk in return promised to feed Mr. Wolf. From that day on, the people kept the pact they had made. The wolf lived for 2 years among the townsfolk, going from door to door for food. It hurt no one, and no one hurt it. When the wolf finally died of old age, the people of Gubbio were sad. Again, with the eyes of our imagination, we have a story extolling brave negotiators, like Francis, and the wonder of finding win-win solutions. The town got freedom from fear. The wolf got freedom from being feared. One way of telling this story is to extol the courage of looking for solutions to problems, solutions where everyone can live together in peace. This is about facing what frightens us, about finding what feeds our wolf's nastiness and help it get its needs met in a different way. It's about even befriending that which frightens us. Peacemakers the world over can see something of what they do in this story. But the tale of the Wolf of Gubbio is also about resources. Why was the wolf risking attacking humans in the first place? What had happened to the food that others in his species had survived on in the past? What ecological imbalance had led to the attacks? This too has echoes for our time, for behind many conflicts there are questions about ownership or access to natural resources, including issues of food and water supplies. And behind the real and threatening extinction of species are the diminishing natural habitats and quality of those habitats for animals, birds, and fish, including wolves. The Francis tradition offers us simple stories, often with the gloss of the godly and miraculous. Yet they're also, when seen with the eyes of the imagination, they touch our reality, encouraging us to care for the wild habitats and their inhabitants, to let gratitude, not greed or even need, be our guide, and to learn to live in harmony with the rhythms of our environment and with all the creatures within them. Blessings to you this week.